93 y'all, EL 131, the Grumpy Thelemite here with Thelemic Union. Today we're talking about the practices of devotion to Nuit. So this video is a bit more advanced than a typical intro video to Thelema. I'm going to assume that you have some level of understanding of things like Nuit, Hadith, the Book of the Law, the basic concepts of Thelema. If not, go check out the other videos on the Thelemic Union YouTube channel and come back when you feel a little more solid on the basics. But for those who are interested, we're talking about the practices of devotion to Nuit. Nuit is the speaker of the first chapter of the Book of the Law, and she represents one of the fundamental principles of the metaphysics of Thelema. So we talk about Nuit, Hadith, etc. as gods and goddesses. They're referred to as such, but they are these kind of ineffable, infinite principles that are beyond label, beyond name, even beyond description entirely. They're described in the Book of the Law and their interaction, and there are different practices given within the Book of the Law, especially in the first chapter, that are supposedly related to Nuit. The Book of the Law itself is pretty arcane. It's pretty difficult to understand and get some concrete, actionable advice out of it. Of course, we have Crowley's commentaries, but he also wrote this text called Liber Nu. So, Liber Nu, subfigura 11. 11 is one of Nuit's numbers. This is one of two texts that Crowley wrote that he put in the Equinox. This was in Equinox Volume 1, number 7, I believe. So this was published openly and publicly and available to anyone that bought or buys the Equinox. That being said, he lays out his understanding of essentially the practices of worshipping Nuit, and in Liber Had, worshipping Hadith. Worshipping, devotion, these are kind of, these words take on a bit different meaning within Thelema, right? We're not just burning incense to a god and hoping that they're going to give us some treats, right? We have a kind of theurgic, Gnostic tradition where experientially we want to come to a kind of inner knowledge that is beyond theoretical knowledge. It comes from our own consciousness, our own experience. And that knowledge, that direct knowledge of these ideas is what we're looking for. So we're focusing on Nuit, but I want to flip back and forth between Liber Nu and Liber Had, just for the beginning of this, just to show these are complementary practices. So in Liber Nu it says, this is the book of the cult of the infinite without. Cult here does not necessarily have the same connotation these days that we might associate with cult. It might mean a kind of small, devoted group of people that are in some kind of esoteric group. Right? So the cult of the infinite without. Infinite without is Nuit. They are the same thing. So flip over to Liber Had. We have, this is the book of the cult of the infinite within. That corresponds to Hadith. The next line says the aspirant is Hadith. Nuit is the infinite expansion of the rose. Hadith, the infinite concentration of the rood. Instruction of VVV. So in Liber Nu, the aspirant is Hadith. You might say, of course the aspirant is Hadith. That lines up to what the Book of the Law says. Within each of us is Hadith, so of course the aspirant is Hadith. Well, in Liber Had, the aspirant is Nuit. Right? You identify with Nuit. So I mention this because people tend to have a very lopsided view of things. One thing has to be one way and not another. The aspirant is Hadith. That which they aspire to is Nuit. But Crowley himself was obviously much more flexible about his understanding with this. So going back to Liber Nu, Nuit is the infinite expansion of the rose. Hadith, the infinite concentration of the rood, or the cross. Right? Rood, or cross, or phallus. These are all kind of interchangeable words for Crowley. So what he's saying is Nuit and Hadith are kind of the infinite expansion of the rose cross. So if you take the rose of the rose cross, that circle, and expand it to infinity, well, that's Nuit. If you take the cross of the rose cross and concentrate it down to an infinite point, that would be Hadit. Now it says instruction of VVVVV. Now, to me, this is simply Aleister Crowley's motto as a Magister Templi, a Master of the Temple. He says exactly this, that this is his motto. Other people want to believe this is a separate person, a secret chief, who gave instructions to Crowley. Either way, this line in particular is considered that kind of illuminated instruction from that third order, right, from the supernal triangle. Liber Nu is kind of unique because he has these little parentheticals at the end of each line explaining why this line is here. He goes on to say, first, let the aspirant learn in his heart the first chapter of the Book of the Law, instruction of VVVVV. So again, this line comes from the illuminated perspective of that person, VVVVV, and they're telling us the first practice in the devotion to Nuit, in this book of the Cult of the Infinite Without. Learn the first chapter of the Book of the Law. Of course, Nuit is the speaker of the first chapter of the Book of the Law. This makes a lot of sense. Also note here that these lines are line 000, line 00, and line 0. This is kind of a cute reference to the negative veils of the Kabbalistic tree of life. So they kind of correspond in a way to that. I wouldn't look too far into these correspondences. Right? He does this in a lot of different texts using these kind of Kabbalistic attributions of the line numbers themselves. So we go on, and we already have the first instruction, which is to learn the first chapter of the Book of the Law in your heart, which I would argue begins with memorization, but memorization is not sufficient to have it in your heart. Line 1 says, worship, i.e. identify thyself with the Cobbs, the secret light within the heart. So this is interesting. It shows, first of all, Crowley's understanding of worship is, again, not getting down on your knees and praying for something. It is a magical act of identifying yourself with that higher truth, with that ultimate reality. Within ourselves, that's known as the light, it's known as the Cobbs or the star. This is the core of ourself, this kind of inner invisible sun. He goes on to say in this line, within this, again, unextended, is Hadit. So Hadit has no dimensions. It's not an object in space or time. Hadit is outside all categories. Hadit is not extended, as Crowley would say, in any categories. So there's nothing you can really say about Hadit. Whatever you would say about Hadit, you're really actually talking about some aspect of Nuit. So Crowley writes, this is the first practice of meditation. And then it says CCXX, I6, and 21. This is a reference to the Book of the Law. CCXX is 220. The Book of the Law is Liber L Velegas, so figura 220, because there are 220 lines in that text, and for some other reasons. So you might want to look up what these lines are. So 1:6 and 21. So we go to the Book of the Law. If we go to chapter 1, verse 6, it says, be thou Hadit, my secret center, my heart, and my tongue. So this line encourages us to identify with Hadit, which is exactly what this part of Liber Nu says. Identify thyself with the Cobbs. Within the Cobbs is Hadit. So that's 1:6, and then Liber L 21 says, with the God and the adorer, I am nothing. They do not see me. They are upon the earth. I am heaven, and there's no other God than me and my Lord Hadit. So I don't want to be too much of a center of pestilence, but in Crowley's commentary, he explains in this particular line that with normal people, they see themselves as the adorer separate from a God. That God that is out there or up there in heaven, separate from me. That is exactly what this part of Liber Nu is trying to get you to get over. Right? So you're supposed to worship the light that is within you. Hadit is within you, not some God outside of you that you bend a knee to. Right? Not something separate from you. Not something outside you, but within you. Not only within you, but it is your truest self. Number 2, adore and understand the rim of the stele revealing. And then it quotes this line in the Book of the Law. Above the gemmed azure is the naked splendor of Nuit. She bends in ecstasy to kiss the secret ardors of Hadith. This is the first practice of intelligence, Book of the Law, chapter 1, verse 14. If we look at verse 14, it is simply that same line that is quoted in Liber Nu. So it says, adore and understand the rim of the stele. That rim is Nuit. Right? So now the practice is to adore Nuit under the figure or within the image of that kind of bending star goddess as it appears on the stele. So adore and understand the rim of the stele. That it does not say look at it and think about the correspondences. It says adore it and understand the stele revealing. So your focus, your object of meditation, is the rim of the stele revealing. So already, just at the beginning of this text, we have a few practices. First of all, you learn a chapter of the Book of the Law. Second of all, you identify yourself with the Qabs, the secret light within your heart, within which is Hadith. And then you adore and understand the rim of the stele of revealing. After that, we have avoid any act of choice or discrimination. Discrimination here means to discriminate between one thing and another thing, right? Not to be racist or something like that. That is an example of discriminating, but this is discrimination in a much more fundamental sense. If you were to walk into a market and there were 5 different types of breakfast cereal, you would just reach out and pick the first one. You wouldn't make a choice. You wouldn't discriminate between the cereals. It says this is the first practice of ethics. Right? So this is starting to alter your behaviors. There's an ethical practice as part of this devotion to Nuit. It says Liber L, chapter 1, verse 22. So verse 22, the part that's relevant is at the end here where it says, by nothing. Let there be no difference made among you between any one thing and any other thing, for thereby there cometh hurt. This is Crowley's interpretation of this line, or an actionable form of this line of the Book of the Law, right? By nothing. Let there be no difference made among you between any one thing and any other thing, i.e. do not discriminate between anything. Remember, the true act of worship to Nuit, the true result would be some kind of identification or approximation to Nuit herself, to infinity. Right? To make any kind of choice, to make any kind of discrimination, that is being stuck in duality. There are reasons for making choices, but within the practice of Liber Nu, this is an ethical aspect of this devotional practice to Nuit. Number 4, now we have some kablabla. It says, consider of 6 and 50 that 50 divided by 6 equals 0.12. Right, so these numbers come from the Book of the Law, where Nuit says, my number is 6 and 50. It says, I am Nuit, and my word is 6 and 50, divide, add, multiply, and understand. So Crowley is taking these lines from the Book of the Law, and saying, consider. 50 divided by 6 is 0.12. This number is a kind of numerical symbol. 0 is Nuit, point is Hadith, 1 is the unity proceeding from Nuit and Hadith uniting, which is we call Rahu Kuit or Horus or Hiru Raha or whatever. And then 2, the world of illusion, the world of duality. So Nuit thus comprehends all of these things within herself. She comprehends all in none. So within this equation given in the Book of the Law, there's kind of numerical symbolism that Nuit contains herself, Hadith, Rahu Kuit, and illusion all within herself. This is not simple gematria of this number equals this. This is taking the idea behind these numbers and truly understanding what they're getting at. So these are kind of Kabbalistic meditations that are part of this practice of devotion to Nuit. He goes on to say also 50 plus 6 is 56. 56 is Nuit's number. 5 plus 6 equals 11. 11 is the key of all rituals. 11 is 5 plus 6, or microcosm and macrocosm. Crowley understood the uniting of microcosm and macrocosm to be the ultimate key of all rituals. One word that expresses this is abrahadabra. There are, of course, many other words, many other formulas, many other symbols that represent this. but 11 is a number of magic and a number of union of opposites within Thelema. And then also 50 times 6 equals 300. 300 is Shin, the Hebrew letter Shin, which is the Holy Spirit, the spirit of the child within, as he says here. He also adds this kind of weird Greek isopsophy gematria with a dead gamma, and who knows how we got this, but it equals 72, the Shimham Farash and the quinaries of the zodiac. In other words, Nuit represents everything. This is the second practice of intelligence, and then it references Liber L 24 and 25, which we've already talked about. The word being 6 and 50, divide, add, multiply, and understand. So these kind of Kabbalistic meditations are the second practice of intelligence. Next, it says the result of this practice is the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of the body of Nuit. In other words, the aspirant is conscious only of the infinite universe as a single being. It then says, note for this the importance of paragraph 3. Going back, paragraph 3 is when we avoid any active choice or discrimination. In other words, we do not engage in duality or grant it some kind of reality by making choices within it, at least within this particular practice of Liber Nu. So that discrimination, he's saying, is a barrier to becoming conscious of the infinite universe as a single being, right? Because there can't be you and this universe. That is two different things. There is simply a consciousness of a single universe that is infinite, a unitary consciousness, a monistic consciousness. Crowley talks about this all the time. There's a whole video I just did about Samadhi in Thelema that is relevant to this. But one thing to note is that Crowley is very consciously giving a comment to this line of the Book of the Law. Right? He says this is the first indication of the nature of the result. Book of the Law, chapter 1, verse 26. Verse 26 is, right, all the way down here, the sign shall be my ecstasy, the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of my body. So in Liber Nu, he's giving a comment on this line. He's saying the result of this practice is the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of the body of Nuit, which he understands to mean becoming conscious of the infinite universe as a single being. It doesn't mean becoming conscious of your past lives. Right? Continuity here refers to physical continuity. That which is not discrete, that which does not have space marks, that which is not discontinuous or atomic in the way that Hadith is. Nuit is without boundary, without space mark. All of this is very coherent, right? So Samadhi, in this particular sense of a consciousness of a single infinite universe that is a unitary being, that is the result we're looking for, right? We're not looking for a new car. We're not looking for even our true will being revealed. It is this consciousness of the universe as a single being. Next, it says, meditate upon Nuit as the continuous one, resolved into none and two as phases of her being. For the universe being self-contained must be capable of expression by the formula n minus n equals 0. For if not, let it be expressed by the formula n minus n equals p. That is, the infinite moves otherwise than within itself, which is absurd. This is Crowley going into too much detail for this particular section, I think, but this is an early formulation of this idea of 0 equals 2. Right? N minus n equals 0, or yin minus yang equals 0, or 1 plus negative 1 equals 0. The universe is composed of pairs of opposites, and these opposites, when united, resolve back into 0. So Nuit is that which is none and two. Nuit is none, insofar as she is the underlying ineffable unity of all things, the ground of all being, not even the unity of all being, but the potential of infinite possibilities of being. She is also two, which is any expression, any actuality of those potentials. In other words, the universe you're experiencing. And Nuit is both of these. The ultimate form of this is that Nuit is not both none and two, but that none is two. These are things that are very difficult to explain in a brief video, and again, the point of this is for you to meditate upon this, not to come to an intellectual understanding, but to truly meditate upon Nuit as an image of that continuous one that is both none and two. It says, this is the second practice of meditation, chapter 1, verse 27. Right, that verse is when the speaker says, O Nuit, continuous one of heaven, let it be ever thus, that men speak not of thee as one, but as none, and let them speak not of thee at all, since thou art continuous. Nuit then replies, basically none and two. Right? Not just none, but none and two. Number 7. Meditate upon the facts of samadhi on all planes, the liberation of heat in chemistry, joy in natural history, ananda in religion, when two things join to lose themselves in a third. This is the third practice of meditation. Chapter 1, verses 28, 29, and 30. 28, 29, and 30 are the creation story of Liber Nu. Right? None, breathe the light, faint and fairy of the stars, and two. For I am divided for love's sake, for the chance of union. This is the creation of the world, that the pain of division is as nothing, and the joy of dissolution all. So the creation of the world is 0 becoming 2, the pain of division, the one becoming many, in other words. And yet this creates the possibility of union, and these unions create joy. So he calls this samadhi on all planes. He comes to, in his later writings, simply call this love, the union of two things to create a third. So the liberation of heat in chemistry, he loved this analogy where this general idea that when two molecules combine, this heat is released as an extra kind of energy, which is very similar to the joy that's experienced when you unite subject and object. Right? So it's this idea that on all levels, on the physical level, on the level of consciousness, the universe is composed of acts of love, whether it's the union of atoms, whether it's the union of subject and object, or anything else. This is something that you're supposed to practice as a meditation, as one of many practices in this devotion to Nuit. Number 8 says, let the aspirant pay utmost reverence to the authority of the AA and follow its instructions. Let him swear a great oath of devotion unto Nuit. Liber L 132. So 32, obey my prophet, follow out the ordeals of my knowledge, seek me only, which is Nuit, right? Seek only Nuit. And the joys of my love will redeem me from all pain, etc., etc. So obey my prophet, right? Obey the authority of the AA, obey VVV, follow its instructions, which we're doing, right? So Liber Nu is an instruction of the AA. We might also simply think of AA as the eternal order of enlightened people, not necessarily swearing to the authority of some temporal organization. And so I swear a great oath of devotion unto Nuit. So, it's not 100% clear exactly what the nature of that oath is, but I imagine some kind of spontaneous oath, something that is meaningful to you, is a good place to start. Number 9, let the aspirant beware of the slightest exercise of his will against another being. Thus, lying is a better posture than sitting or standing, as it opposes less resistance to gravitation, yet his first duty is to the force nearest and most potent. In other words, for example, he may rise to greet a friend. Liber L, chapter 1, verse 41. Verse 41 is the word of sin is restriction. So now we're going to practice, this practice of ethics is trying to be aware of imposing your will on the outside world at all. Right? Trying not to impose anything from you onto the world. Number 10 is the opposite. So it says, let the aspirant exercise his will without the least consideration for any other being. This direction cannot be understood, much less accomplished, until the previous practice has been perfected. Right? So you have to first become hyper aware of the ways in which your will is exerted on others before you can truly understand if you are taking consideration of the other being or not. This says Liber L 42, 43, and 44. Those lines are the famous lines where it says, so with thy all, thou hast no right but to do thy will, do that and no other shall say nay, for pure will unassuaged of purpose, delivered from the lust of result, is every way perfect. It is an interesting juxtaposition of the word of sin is restriction, being not imposing your will on others, versus thou hast no right but to do thy will as doing whatever it is without even caring about other people. Number 11 then says, let the aspirant comprehend that these two practices are identical. And then it references verse 45, the perfect and the perfect are one perfect, and not two, they are none. So this is obviously a practice of intelligence to figure this out. Personally, I think this has to do with the fact that under number 9, we the microcosm, are trying to not exert our will whatsoever on the macrocosm and simply let the macrocosm, the world around us, do whatever. Number 10 is the exact opposite, the microcosm imposing its will on the macrocosm. And then these practices are identical, that ultimately, in a mystical way, the microcosm and macrocosm should be not only aligned, but united, so that there are not two separate wills here. There is not a microcosmic will at variance with the macrocosmic world, or vice versa. There is simply one will. There is not two perfects. There is one perfect. Number 12 says, let the aspirant live the life beautiful and pleasant, for this freedom hath he won, but let each act, especially of love, be devoted wholly to his true mistress, Nuit. 51, 52, 61, 63, right? This is where the Book of the Law says, be goodly therefore, dress ye all in fine apparel, eat rich foods, drink sweet wines, take your fill and will of love, as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will, but always unto me. If this not be aright, if ye confound the space mark, saying they are one, or saying they are many, if the ritual be not ever unto me, then expect the direful judgments of Ra or Kuit. And then, but to love me is better than all things, etc. And sing the rapturous love song unto me, burn to me perfumes, wear to me jewels, etc. So Crowley interprets this as living a beautiful and pleasant life is a practice of devotion to Nuit. She calls for it in the Book of the Law. And yet, all of these things, all these pleasures, all these acts of love should be devoted to Nuit, which is to say, the ground of all being, the infinite possibilities that make all of this possible. Not for yourself, not for the results, not because of your petty desires, but because it's one expression among many, because it's one play of Nuit among infinite. It says then, number 13, let the aspirant yearn towards Nuit under the stars of night with a love directed by his magical will, not merely proceeding from the heart. This is Crowley's understanding of verse 57, invoke me under my stars, love is the law, love under will. Okay, number 14, the result of this practice in the subsequent life of the aspirant is to fill him with unimaginable joys, to give him certainty concerning the nature of the phenomenon called death, and to give him peace, unalterable rest, and ecstasy. This is the second indication of the nature of the result. Of course, this is basically the exact line 58 from chapter 1. Let the aspirant prepare a perfume of resinous woods and gums according to his inspiration. This is the second practice of magic art. So this corresponds to line 59, my incense is of resinous woods and gums. So Crowley took these things quite literally, right? Nuit says prepare an incense. Well, maybe you should prepare that incense if you care so much about Nuit. Number 16, let the aspirant prepare a panicle as follows. Inscribe a circle within a pentagram upon a ground square or of such other convenient shape as he may choose. Let the circle be scarlet and the pentagram black, the ground royal blue studded with golden stars. Within the circle at its center shall be painted a sigil that shall be revealed to the aspirant by Nuit herself. And this pentacle shall serve for a talismanic image, or as an eidolon, or as a focus for the mind. In other words, Crowley is saying to basically create a yantra, create an image, a focus of meditation, a symbolic focus of meditation. And this comes from chapter 160. Right, my number is 11, as all their numbers were of us, the 5-pointed star with the circle in the middle, and the circle is red. My color is black to the blind, but blue and gold are seen of the seeing. Also I have a secret glory for them that love me. So Crowley interpreted this as using this as a kind of image to focus on Nuit, and that Nuit would reveal a sigil or image, an eidolon, all these things, basically a symbol for you to put in the middle of this as your personal focus. Number 17, let the aspirant find a lonely place, if possible, a place in the desert of sand, or if not, a place unfrequented, and without objects to disturb the view. Such are moorlands, fens, the open sea, broad rivers, and open fields. Also, and especially the summits of mountains. There let him invoke the goddess as he hath wisdom and understanding so to do. But let this invocation be that of a pure heart, i.e. a heart wholly devoted to her. And let him remember that it is Hari himself, in the most secret place thereof, that invoketh. Then let this serpent Hari burst into flame. This is the fourth practice of magic. 161. 161 is, but to love me is better than all things. If under the night stars in the desert thou presently burnest mine incense before me, invoking me with a pure heart and the serpent flame therein, thou shalt come a little to lie in my bosom. For one kiss wilt thou then be willing to give all, but whoso gives one particle of dust shall lose all in that hour. Then shall the aspirant come a little to lie in her bosom. Of course, that is from the same line. This is the third indication of the nature of the result. Number 19, let the aspirant stand upon the edge of a precipice in act or in imagination, and let him imagine and suffer the fear of falling. Next, let him imagine with this aid that the earth is falling, and he with it, or he from it. And considering the infinity of space, let him excite the fear within him to the point of ecstasy, so that the most dreadful dream of falling that he hath ever suffered be as nothing in comparison. This is the fourth practice of meditation, instruction of VVV. Right? So this doesn't really come from the Book of the Law. This is, again, another specific instruction from VVV. Number 20, thus having understood the nature of this third indication, the third indication is where we come a little to lie in Nuit's bosom. Let him in his magic rite fall from himself into Nuit, or expand into her, as his imagination may compel him. And at that moment, desiring earnestly the kiss of Nuit, let him give one particle of dust, i.e., let Hari give himself up utterly to her. This is the fifth practice of magic art. Then shall he lose all in that hour. This is the fourth indication of the nature of the result. Line 61 that we already spoke about from the Book of the Law. Number 22, let the aspirant prepare a love song of rapture unto the goddess, or let him be inspired by her unto this. This is a reference to line 63, sing the rapturous love song unto me, burn to me perfumes, wear to me jewels. So again, Crowley took this literally. You should literally prepare a love song of rapture to Nuit, the goddess. Again, this is not just a goddess, one goddess among many that you perform these songs unto. Nuit is the ground, the source of all being, that which all things come from, that which all things go to. This is not just looking up your correspondences in 777. This is a love song to ultimate reality. Line 23, let the aspirant be clad in a single robe. An abai of scarlet wrought with gold is most suitable. The abai is not unlike the Japanese kimono. It must fold simply over the breast without belt or other fastening. So this is some weird piece of clothing that Crowley encountered in his travels, but what he means is just a very simple robe. This is not a Tao robe, first of all, so you can see he was actually much more flexible in his magical thinking than all the magicians that came after him. This comes, again, from that same line of the Book of the Law, come before me in a single robe, covered in a rich headdress. So line 24 then says, let the aspirant wear a rich headdress, a crown of gold adorned with sapphires or diamonds with a royal blue cap of maintenance, or nemes is most suitable. Right, so it's kind of similar to the priest in the Gnostic Mass, except the cap of maintenance is royal blue. A nemes is given as an option. So these lines in the Book of the Law where she says, come out to the desert, come in a single robe, sing a love song unto me, burn to me incense and perfumes. Crowley thinks this is very literally an instruction, a magical instruction. And so when you think about the practices of Nuit, you would think that Nuit herself would give the best ones in the Book of the Law. All right, so line 25, let the aspirant wear many jewels as he may possess. Number 26, let the aspirant prepare an elixir or libation as he may have wit to do. Right, so libation implies some kind of champagne, wine, wines that foam that come from the other chapter of the Book of the Law. Elixir here may have a different connotation for those that are into the sex magic of OTO and otherwise. But some kind of elixir. I could imagine one could also interpret this as some kind of psychedelic elixir, as Crowley was one of the pioneers of using psychedelics for spiritual purposes. Finally, 27, let the aspirant invoke, lying supine, his robe spread out, as it were, a carpet. So all these things together, you finally are out in the desert or on a mountaintop with this single robe covered in rich headdress, burning these perfumes, drinking this elixir, and then invoking under the stars. So this text ends by saying, preliminaries, you need these things. You need a crown. You need the jewels, the panicle, the robe, the song or incantation, the place of invocation, the perfume, the elixir. These are all things we just spoke about. These are necessary comprehensions. The natures of Nuit and Hadit and their relation. This is explained in those initial lines of Liber Nu and the corresponding lines of Liber Had. The mystery of individual will. These are the meditations necessary to be accomplished. The discovery of Hadit and the aspirant and the identification with him. The continuous one, where Nuit is the continuous one who is both none and two. The value of the equation n plus minus n. That's part of the 0 equals 2 equation. The n plus minus n is the 2. N plus minus n means anything and its opposite. So the universe is composed of opposites, but since they are opposites, they cancel out into 0. And then kremnophobia, which means fear of falling. That refers to these practices of expanding and feeling like you're falling off the earth that were mentioned before. These are the ethical practices to be accomplished. Assertion of the Keter point of view. The Keter point of view is the unity of the tree of life, the number 1. So there is no duality, there is no discrimination or choice. Right? The first act of ethics is to not make any kind of choice or discrimination by nothing. Number 2, reverence to the order, AA. 3, abolition of human will. 4, exercise of true will. 5, devotion to Nuit through a beautified life. Again, these are just summaries of these things that we were talking about. The actual rite. So he envisioned an actual rite happening where you retire to the desert with a crown and other insignia and implements as described in the text. You burn perfume. You sing your love song. You chant your incantation. You drink unto Nuit of the elixir. And then lying supine with eyes fixed on the stars, you practice the sensation of falling into nothingness. Being actually within the bosom of Nuit, let Hadit surrender himself. The results, expansion of consciousness to that of the infinite, right? The consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of Nuit's body. Number 2, the loss of all, the highest mystical attainment, where the union is so perfect, even one particle of dust, that final particle of Hadit, is given up so that the union might be complete, that there are no longer two, but there are none. And then finally, true wisdom and perfect happiness. And of course, the accomplishment of the great work is always the goal here, and the expression of true wisdom and perfect happiness in life. Like to go about your will in the lands of the living. So hopefully this was interesting to some people. I doubt this is exactly what many people expected when you see the title, The Practices of Devotion to Nuit, but Crowley left these instructions, and I can't say that I've really heard anyone go into these in depth. Of course, there's the corresponding text of Liber Had that I encourage you to study as well, with its corresponding practices and so on. All of this is really a much more advanced level. I believe you should really have a theoretical understanding of Thelema under your belt, as well as some basic magical and mystical practices under your belt. So, of course, Thelemic Union offers an introductory course online that you can start at any time. You can go to ThelemicUnion.com, check that out if you're interested in starting to establish a magical practice. The course tries to enable you to establish a very solid practice within about 120 days. If you were to actually do everything within that course in those 120 days, you'd be in a great position to start practicing some of the things that we talked about today in Liber Nu. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. Remember to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Say in the comments any questions or any topics you'd like to see in the future. And until then, 93.